Hello and welcome to this podcast from the BBC World Service. Please let us know what you think and tell other people about us on social media. Podcasts from the BBC World Service are supported by advertising.
Hello, welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. We're coming to you live from London. My name's Paul Henley. First on the programme today, it's not unusual for temperatures in Europe's eastern Mediterranean to exceed 40 degrees Celsius at this time of year. And forest fires amid such heat are hardly unheard of. But the emergencies occurring daily in Greece and Turkey at the moment are of extra concern because they chime so clearly with experts' warnings that their frequency and intensity are the direct results of global warming. In a moment, we'll hear from one resident of a Turkish village near Marmaris, all but destroyed by fires that have been raging for 8 days. But first to Greece, where massive fires near the ancient Olympic site in the Peloponnese are still to be brought under control. We're joined now on the line by Nikolia Alpolotou, who is a freelance journalist currently in the city of Kalamata in the Peloponnese. Welcome. What can you see from where you are?
Hello. From where we are right now, we can see there's a cloud, a smoke cloud coming from the north, where there's another fire just 30 kilometers away from us.
And you're being told to keep your windows closed, I hear. Correct.
Yes, that's all over Greece. So the air quality is really bad right now because of the fires. But right now, there's a new fire in Athens. And two neighborhoods are being evacuated. Right now, there are another 30 villages are being evacuated in Ilia, Evia, and Messenia. So things are really grim and they're getting worse. As of Wednesday night, more than 300 homes and businesses have been destroyed from fires. And we really don't know when this is going to end.
Tell me about the effort to save archaeological sites in Olympia.
Mm-hmm. Yes, all night long, the fire department was trying to save the site. It looks like it has been saved, but many people are complaining that help from airplanes couldn't reach them in other regions because the government had focused on the archaeological site.
You say complaining. How are people feeling about government efforts to put out the fires?
People are really angry and they're staying put in their villages even though they've been told to evacuate because they don't see help coming. So it's their only hope to save their homes is by staying there.
To what extent do people expect fires at this time of year in Greece?
It's very common. It has happened before. Some years are worse than others. This looks like to be a really bad year. In just the last 3 days, a region of the size of London, of the city of London, has been burned. That's like 50% of what gets burned usually every year in Greece.
And what do you expect to happen next? Because there isn't much sign of an end to this, is there?
Mm-hmm. No, there isn't. And actually, next week we'll have a new heat wave. And there will be more winds next week. So we're really worried. And Sweden and Cyprus have sent in firefighters and planes. But that's not enough. There are still so many fires and there's not enough.
And the debate about climate change, I imagine, is live, is it now?
Yes. People are feeling it. And nothing was done to prepare for it.
Many thanks. That's freelance journalist Nikolia Alpolotou, who's in the Peloponnese city of Kalamata in Greece. Well, a wildfire that has raged for more than a week has reached a thermal power station on Turkey's Aegean coast. The coal-fired facility had already been evacuated and flammable materials removed. A government spokesman said aircraft would continue dousing the plant with water throughout today to try to cool it down. Well, more and more villagers near Marmaris, also on the coast, are having to be evacuated. Verda Vardar comes from one of those villages. She had to leave her home in Hisaronu, which has been all but destroyed by flames. She told me she felt abandoned by the authorities as she described her situation.
We are 1 hour away from the village and staying in the hotel since we are evacuated on the weekend. And every day we are going to a village to check the situation and also to help to villagers. to support them. And at the same time, we are broadcasting through Instagram and Facebook so that our voice can be heard. Since before, I think 3-4 days ago, until that time, we couldn't manage to put Hisarönü and other villages within the media.
And what's happening in your village? What does it look like?
So currently in Hisarönü, the situation is better versus 2 days ago, because there is nothing left to be burned except the houses. And now the fire spread to the next villages, Orhani and Turgut. And like we had faced the same situation 2 days ago, now they are facing again this tragedy, because there is no enough intervention from the air. And now residential areas in Turgut and Orhani has started to also be in fire.
So the fires are spreading still?
Yeah.
Have you seen anything like this before?
No, not really. Until now, I think above 130 wildfires happening across Turkey coast, which is huge.
What does the fire look like when you're up close to it?
It was horrible, because it started as of Thursday evening. And we were thinking, okay, we are seeing the fires are coming, which is 20 kilometers to our village. And we were coming back from Marmaris to our village from town. And we said, okay, probably they will stop, because it can not go like this, yeah? And then we watch every day how it came close within the village. So it was such a tragedy, like a movie from, the day after tomorrow.
The government in Ankara is concerned about social media posts such as yours, saying they're trying to create anxiety, fear and panic in the public.
I mean, they can say that, but they didn't leave any other choice to us, because although we are saying what is needed, if nobody is hearing us, what else we can do as a citizen? So there is only social media or some independent journalist, artist who is living in that area, try to post these things so that, we take the attention from not only Turkish authorities, but at the same time from outside of Turkey.
Does what's happening now make you have second thoughts about living in the forested area? Do you think you might want to get out permanently?
No, because we want to help our villagers to heal our wounds, So everybody is devastated psychologically, first of all, and also economically.
How are you hoping the fires will eventually be brought under control?
To be honest, we are a bit hopeless, because this is the 8th day and still we are screaming towards social media for help. Yesterday, Turgut was under fire, the village, and it came to residential area. The houses started to burn, and you can hear the scream of the poor villagers, how devastated they are. And still, we don't have enough plane intervention from the air, because limited helicopters is not enough to stop this fire. Why? Why still the help is late? It's not coming enough. And we are not saying anything bad to the government or state. We are just asking help and asking question why. Why we don't have enough capacity or resource? Why we didn't intervene immediately when it had started 8 days ago?
That was Verda Varda posting on social media. She's from the village of Hisarönü, which is near Marmaris in Turkey. Dr. Gavril Xanthopoulos is head of the fire laboratory at the Institute of Mediterranean Forest Ecosystems in Athens. I asked him if lessons have been learnt from huge forest fires that happened in Greece in 2018.
The question is if we learned the right lesson, because the measures that we have taken after that, in spite of a special committee that was appointed and produced the results in a particular direction, the course that we followed is exactly the opposite. Emphasis on fire suppression, and as a result, we are having what we are seeing today.
What should you have done?
I think we should stress fire prevention. Fire prevention is a very complex task. It's not easy, and this is not happening in Greece and probably in many other countries in the Mediterranean.
Most people assume that fire is most likely to kill them in their homes and that they're safer out in the open. That's actually not the case, right?
This is exactly the wrong conclusion. The people that were killed in Mati, fire of 1998, 102 people, 10, 12 of them were in the sea when they died, The rest were mostly in the open. Very few people died in their homes. And in 2007, exactly the same. 84 fatalities, only 3 or 4 people were dead in their homes. The rest were caught in the open. This is where the fire kills you.
If you live in a forested area, can you build safely against a fire?
Yes, but if you are really within a forest, you need a lot of work in order to make your home safe. First of all, you need some clearance so the vegetation is not too close to the home. And also the materials of the home must be non-flammable. For example, the roof, which is the weak point usually, but also there have to be shutters, which are non-flammable, and double-pane glasses, and no flammable materials outside. Even the topography has a lot to do with that. If your home is in a very steep slope, then the risk is much higher than when it is on flat ground. If it is within an agricultural field with olive groves around where you can keep the grasses cleaned, that could be quite safe. Or vineyard, for example. A vineyard acts like a fire break. We have not prepared the people on how to prepare their homes and what to do in case of fire.
Maybe you need to ban all new residential building in forested areas.
That would be a very good idea. There is a lot of pressure for tourist purposes, but also for the need for people to have a vacation home. It can be done through organizing settlements. That is, planning and building settlements from the beginning with fire safety in our mind. And this is not done so far. Things are being developed ad hoc, and afterwards we are looking for the culprits.
Do you put all this down to climate change?
Climate change has a role. Things are getting worse little by little. We are having extreme fire season more often. This was predicted in the beginning of this decade when they said that what we have been seeing so far in Southern Europe once every 10 years will be like one every 2 years after 2030. But this is not only climate change. It has to do with a lack of prevention, with a lack of preparation of people, and with shortcomings regarding our firefighting organizations. The Forest Service used to be responsible in Greece until 1998 for forest fires. What we are seeing now is an urban-centric approach which does not really consider what happens in the forest. People in the city do not understand the forest. Foresters and the people living there, the people in the villages, they understand much better.
That was Dr. Gavril Xanthopoulos, who's an expert on forest fires. He's from the Institute of Mediterranean and Forest Ecosystems in Athens. You're with the BBC World Service live from London. This is NewsHour. Coming up, we hear from Afghanistan, where there's intense fighting between government forces and the Taliban in 2 provincial capitals.
Fighting has intensified since last night in Helmand province. Thousands of people have been killed in the last 24 hours from both sides and the general public. Dead people are lying on the streets and inside the houses. Artillery shellings land on people's homes.
The headlines: the hardline cleric Ibrahim Raisi is about to be inaugurated as president of Iran. 2 of Russia's leading independent news outlets have been forced to close because of a government clampdown. More on that soon. And Amnesty International says the Nigerian security forces killed dozens of people in operations against separatists in the southeast of the country. This is Paul Henley with NewsHour, live from the BBC. It seems being a journalist in Russia is becoming increasingly dangerous. Already last year, Reporters Without Borders ranked the country near the bottom of its Press Freedom Index, pointing out the intimidation journalists can face if they're deemed critical of the Putin government. In recent weeks, there's been a spate of police raids on independent media companies, and now 2 of the country's most prominent independent news outlets are closing down, saying the risks to their journalists are too great. Olga Ivshina is from the BBC Russian service, and she joins us now live. Tell us about these outlets that are closing down, Olga. What explanation have they given?
These were one of the few remaining independent outlets, those which operate globally all around Russia. Of course, some smaller media outlets which operate in Russian regions are remaining, but overall, the pressure on independent journalists in Russia is definitely increasing. Those media outlets, one of them was called Open Media. Psychologically, they are associated with the name of Russian opposition politician and former oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who now lives in London. But technically, they were using his grant, his money, but they weren't promoting his agenda, or they weren't directly associated with him. But Russian officials think in the other way. They claim that they are associated with Mikhail Khodorkovsky's Open Russia Civic Movement, which is considered undesirable and an undesirable organization in Russia, so it's not allowed for it to operate in Russia. So that's the pressure which they put.
It sounds as if they wouldn't have lasted much longer if they hadn't voluntarily closed.
Absolutely, and that was the reason which editor of this outlet and Mikhail Khodorkovsky himself said that they can't risk lives and freedom of their employees, and moreover of their readers, because some other outlets which were called foreign agents, if you retweet them or if you give the direct citation, not mentioning, there is a long sentence which you must mention. If you don't do that, you can be prosecuted just being a reader or just for a retweet of that. So, that's a potential danger for both readers and journalists. And, that's the risks, and not many people are eager to take them.
The government likes to label such outlets foreign. What do they mean?
They mean that they operate with foreign funding, but the wording they use, it's very tricky. They call it foreign agent, and it sounds as if I don't know, it's some foreign spy or something. But it's actually just the outlets which use some foreign grants or something for their operation. And that one of our colleagues from other outlet joked that the harder you criticize the government, the more harsh your investigations are, the shorter your lifespan in Russia as a media outlet is. And it seems to be at least partly the truth.
And lifespans literally as well in some rare cases. Do you think you have to be a special type of risk taker now to become a journalist in Russia, an independent journalist?
Independent journalist, yes, of course, especially if you are eager to criticize the government, if you would like to do some investigations on some high-profile figures, definitely those people must be ready for pressure, direct and indirect, for searches, for potential detentions. That's the price people have to pay for spreading and telling such kind of information.
Many thanks, Olga Ivshina from the BBC's Russian service. The Chinese Communist Party is celebrating its centenary throughout this year with a cultural extravaganza of film, stage productions and musical performances. And one music track released for the occasion has caught attention outside the country. It's a collaboration involving 100 Chinese hip-hop artists singing the praises of the ruling party. And it's seen by some as an example of the extent to which a subversive genre has been used to serve the establishment. Crassy Twig from BBC Monitoring reports.
China has a long tradition of using music to inspire patriotic feelings and love for the party. They have become known as red songs. But in the last few years, a more contemporary genre has joined the traditional, and it has been labelled red rap. This is the latest example. It's a song called 100%, released to mark 100 years of the Chinese Communist Party. It's a collaboration involving a dizzying selection of artists praising the achievements of the country for a whole 15 minutes. Grégoire Bienvenu is a researcher at the Sorbonne Nouvelle University, specializing in the Chinese hip-hop scene.
There's state-endorsed rap music for everything in China, from Karl Marx to, the call for vaccination against COVID-19.
A lot of these kind of government messages appearing in rap songs, you see a lot of these appearing in state media, and These are platforms like People's Daily that are giving them a lot of prominence.
Kerry Allen, who's China media analyst at BBC Monitoring, has been taking a close interest in this music and its relationship with the state.
The government has been wanting to maintain an audience. People's Daily, you see it at bus stations. It's not a newspaper that people actively read. So a lot of these long-standing institutions, they have to find ways of appealing to young people.
But as much as the lyrics of these songs may follow an official state narrative, not everyone is convinced of the party's active involvement in their creation. One argument is that a lot of these songs, by rappers who typically are young people from cities, convey genuine patriotic feelings, a hit back at Western criticism of China.
Hey, democracy, I heard you're never gonna stop the hypocrisy. So many years you've been...
I think people tend to confuse like propaganda project with songs that express basically nationalist sentiments or songs that were used for some particular reasons.
Kanye, an academic at the University of California who has studied hip-hop censorship in China, says there's a purely pragmatic reason why artists might want to be involved with such projects.
Some members of these subcultural groups wrote songs like this in order to be recognized by the state or in order to be legitimized by the state. You can't be subversive to be commercially successful. That's the red line that everybody knows.
Commercial success depends on the ability to perform on big stages and get promoted on popular platforms. And that can lead to self-censorship, a concept familiar to journalists working in Chinese state media. Grégoire Bienvenu again.
Chinese rappers are very intelligent and they always navigate between what they can say and what they cannot say. They are always playing what we call the edge ball strategy, trying to find yourself on the edge to maximize your audience because you will gain in authenticity, but to prevent yourself from being trapped by the state censorship.
Chinese hip-hop was never particularly politically subversive, even in its underground days, before it was propelled into the mainstream by a TV show called The Rap of China in 2018. Official objections that followed centered on cultural attitudes to sex, drugs and tattoos. But despite the apparent taming of the genre, a few recent examples observed by Grégoire Bienvenu showed its potential as a medium for implied disapproval. The songs that stood out for him came by less-known artists as a response to China's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
There has been kind of general negative feelings among the Chinese society in the month of February 2020, and we can really feel this in the songs. Some kinds of criticism would also appear. Of course, it's never blunt criticism, but it is said between the lines.
Grégoire Bienvenu ending that report by Crassy Twig from BBC Monitoring. This is the World Service. Welcome back. Coming up next, the agenda for Iran's new president. But first, with less than 3 months to go until the Global Climate Crisis Summit in Glasgow in Scotland, a new youth climate movement has been launched here in the UK. Its aim is to put the heat on politicians to honour environmental promises they've made and to have the courage to make bigger promises in the future. Fatima Ibrahim is spokesperson for the Green New Deal Rising movement.
More than just the next 6 months, this decade has to be the decade of action. In the UK, there's a fantastic opportunity for the British government to start delivering and acting like a credible leader and a credible host of a UN climate summit. The UK government and many governments around the world have only been great at setting targets, saying that we're going to do this by 2050, but when?
And I gather you think the UK hosts have been doing some greenwashing. What do you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the UK government, I have been saying since Paris, has a knack for coming up with targets and saying, hey, we're going to legislate on 2050 and make sure that we've got legislation around decarbonizing by 2050. But they haven't actually done anything. The investment's not there. The investment that's required to put into the economy to make sure that we're moving towards renewables, that we're transitioning our transport systems, that we're greening our homes and our buildings, which are a massive percentage of our emissions, is just not happening.
How far does your passion take you? Where's your red line in terms of campaigning?
Our our red line in terms of campaigning is we need a Green New Deal. A Green New Deal, which is modeled on, Roosevelt's New Deal, where we bring the economy back under the control of democracy, and we set a direction, and that direction being we need to decarbonize quickly, and the vast majority of that decarbonization and action needs to happen over the next 10 years. We need a historic investment in our economy that sets our economy up to deliver green jobs now so people can get to work to delivering a new future for everyone.
But if it looks like you're not going to get that, are you going to lie down in front of lorries? Are you going to stop normal life functioning? What?
We're not disrupting normal life. We're disrupting politics as usual. This is what we're doing, is sending out a notice to MPs, to leaders in all forms, that they will not be able to get on with their day-to-day business without hearing from young people. And whether that means turning up at their constituency offices, stopping them in the street to ask them what they're doing on climate action, that's the level of disruption that we're going after, is that we're holding our public servants to account. What we're not trying to do is disrupt everybody's lives. We believe the British public is completely on our side, and it's that politicians we're drawing the red line for.
And to those who say in some developed countries, yep, we're doing our bit, what about the giants that aren't? Russia, China?
I think Russia, China, all countries should be doing more. But, I live in the UK. I am putting pressure on my government. And the UK is one of the biggest, historic emitters. We have an outsized responsibility for the climate crisis. So yes, and other countries should be doing more. But our country is massively falling behind on its responsibility to both decarbonize quickly, but also providing the finance and technology it's promised developing nations so that they can also do the same.
That's Fatima Ibrahim, who's spokesperson for the Green New Deal Rising movement here in the UK. You're listening to NewsHour from the BBC. My name's Paul Henley. The new president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, today takes the oath before Parliament in Tehran. He's a hardliner, approved, if not hand-picked, by the country's religious supreme leaders. His popularity with the Iranian public is questionable, to say the least. And he'll have to deal with all the discontent caused by an economy battered by continuing US sanctions, a grinding health crisis, and by thorny international relations over the infamous nuclear program. Mohammed Ali Shabani is the founder and editor of Amwaj.media, and he's been telling me more about this new president.
Ibrahim Raisi is a person who made his career in the judicial system, and that's also where a lot of the current shadows he's facing stem from. Back in the late 80s, thousands of prisoners were executed in Iran towards the end of the Iran-Iraq war. The vast majority of these prisoners were affiliates of the Mujahideen Khalq organization, which had been siding with Iraq during that war. So his participation or membership in so-called death commissions, which decided on what to do with these prisoners, continues to haunt him. I think this is crucial to keep in mind. His kind of rise began around 2015, 2016. He was appointed head of one of the most wealthy, most powerful foundations in Iran. It's associated with the shrine in the city of Mashhad. It's a multi-billion-dollar foundation which controls a lot of property, a lot of companies as well. And now he's become president, again, after having failed in 2017 as well, which was his previous run at the presidency, in which he lost to incumbent moderate Hassan Rouhani.
And his questionable human rights record as a judge could hamper his ability to perform on the international stage, couldn't it?
Again, his participation in the so-called death commissions in the late 80s will continue to cast a shadow over his outreach. Having said that, European governments, U.S. government, they're not strangers to dealing with authoritarian leaders with blood on their hands, right? It's been happening all over the region. So I don't see that in itself being the key stumbling block. The key stumbling block here are, where are the interests? What's the vision here? What does he want from Iran? What does the conservative political establishment want for Iran? If there's a fundamental clash of interests here, that's going to be a lot more difficult than if we do see some kind of shared interest here going on.
I mean, the new president has a lot on his plate. Tell me, what do you think his number one priority might be?
I think it's a really good question. What does he need to dive into first? I think any president would have to dive into the economy first and foremost. But having said that, because the economy is so tied into Iran's foreign policy, namely the nuclear deal, I think it's impossible to separate these two things. So we need some kind of clarity on what's going to be next with the nuclear deal, whether Iran's going to stay in it, that they're going to walk away from the table. Whatever it is, the business community needs to know what's next.
And at the international negotiating table, well, specifically at the table with the US, do you think it's possible to be a successful negotiator and to be a hardline conservative?
I think that's the assumption a lot of people make. But having said that, the first engagement between Iran and the US wasn't under a reformist administration. It was in 2007 when Iran and the US held talks on Iraq in the office of the Iraqi prime minister. At that time, the person who was in charge in Iran, the president, well, not the supreme leader, is Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was a hardliner. So we have a precedent for a kind of situation where hardliners are in charge and where we have had dialogue, contrary to some expectation.
I suppose at least the whole leadership in Iran this time will be together as conservatives. There will be some sort of unity that there might not have been before.
Again, that's an assumption about the unitary state theory, as they call it, that when hardliners control all branches of power in Iran, all branches of government, the judiciary, parliament, the presidency, that suddenly there's going to be this harmony and finally, all of the issues Iran faces will be solved. We had this situation before, again in 2005, 2013, around that era, and what happened was that we just saw conservative infighting. So this idea of a unitary state theory, once the conservatives take over all branches of power, we just haven't seen anything like that.
You said Mr. Raisi would prioritise the economy, and he has to calm a lot of unease, to put it mildly, among Iranians at the moment. And one of his big problems is he's not popular.
Well, as you pointed out, and he comes into office on the back of the lowest turnout in the Iranian presidential election ever. The runner-up wasn't any of his other conservative kind of rivals. The runner-up was blank votes. So that in itself tells you that basically right now he's entering office with unclear agenda apart from wanting to fix the economy, unclear agenda about what he's going to do abroad apart from wanting to confront the U.S. more fiercely, so to speak. I think right now there's a lot of questions, many more questions than there are answers.
And how close to crisis do you think this administration is because of the lack of that public buy-in?
I think it's entering with multiple crises. You have water crises in Iran right now leading to social unrest. You have the issue with the nuclear deal, a diplomatic crisis abroad. You have the issues in the region, relations with Saudi Arabia, other rival states, with Israel. I mean, it's just, yes, he's entering office facing multiple crises, not just one.
That was Mohammed Ali Shabani, who's founder and editor of Amwaj.media in Iran. Alastair Burt is a former UK government minister for the Middle East and in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and a former member of Parliament here in London. He joins me now live to discuss what Iranian foreign policy might look like under President Raisi. Welcome, Mr. Burt. Do you think the international community can cross towards Iran if the bridge is this new hardliner?
Well, the bridge is there, and it doesn't really matter that much to the West, the character of the bridge. If the bridge is the new president, then that is the reality, and that has to be worked with. I think Mr. Shabani's analysis was correct. The new president faces a huge number of challenges, in which his first determination must be to improve the condition of the Iranian people, but that can't be done without attending to foreign policy issues, and he is the leader who everyone is going to have to deal with. And it's not just the West, it is of course regional partners, and I think the evidence is that the importance of regional partners has been growing in recent times, and that's now a matter to be taken into serious consideration.
Iran has learnt that the West can just pull the rug out from under any deal the way President Trump did. Why should they trust us again?
It's a good question. It's one of the reasons I and the United Kingdom was so concerned about the actions of the Trump administration. Having got a situation against a very suspicious background of Iran about deals and arrangements, having got an agreement, and then for the Americans to walk away completely undermined the basis of the agreement and undermined the Rouhani presidency, because the hardliners could then say, well, we told you so. And it's a big question. Why should anyone sign up to an agreement that people might walk away from? That will make the agreement more difficult to come to, but it doesn't negate the fact that a non-nuclear Iran is much better for everyone in the region, including Iran, than it is for should Iran possess a nuclear weapons capability. And that will increase the determination of everybody to keep on working for it. But there's no doubt that the terms will have been altered to some degree by the circumstances in which the JCPOA was walked away from.
Apart from a nuclear deal, which would make it feel more secure, what does Europe want from Iran?
I think we have to go back to one of the questions that Mr. Shabani dealt with, and that is the key issue is, what sort of Iran does Iran look for in the future? No one's quite sure. Is Iran still a revolutionary state trying to provoke Shia revolution around the region? Has it realised the limitations of such actions because of the way in which it is dealt with, because of what it has been doing and the harm that it has caused in various places? What sort of future does Iran want? If Iran wants a future which engages with regional powers around it, wants to add to the security and stability of the region in a manner which we have not seen up to now, then that is the sort of Iran that Europe will want to see, and Europe will want to work with, encourage economically, because the more stable Iran is, the more stable its people are, the better its economy is, the better for all. But there is a price to be paid, and that is a price to be negotiated between a very suspicious Iran and, to a certain extent, many of the rest of the world.
And just briefly, do you think the West can take heart from the idea that the Iranian people want to reach out to the West more than perhaps the Iranian leadership? Just briefly.
The Iranian people have always been an outward-going people, and there's no doubt that the government, it struggles to reflect that. A government that reflected more of what the Iranian people want to see from the world around them and their engagement, encouraging relationships with regional partners and the West, and taking a different direction would be one which would be good for Iran and good for the rest of the world.
Many thanks. Alistair Burt, former UK Government Minister for the Middle East in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. After 20 years, what has the West to show for the effort it's expended in Afghanistan? The former commander of US troops there, General David Petraeus, has warned of dire consequences as a result of the American decision to withdraw. The situation seems to be deteriorating as the Taliban continues assaults on provincial capitals, Herat in the west, Lashkar in the south, the capital of Helmand province, which British soldiers once controlled. The UN says it's deeply concerned about the safety of tens of thousands of civilians. Saeed Abdullah Nizami of the BBC's Pashtun service has been talking to people in Lashkar.
د لشکرګاه و ښار ته که یو طالب راسي یو بمري که زر طالبان راځي زر بمري.
In Lashkar, a general in the Afghan army is telling people to abandon their homes. As Afghan forces fight Taliban on the streets of this city, the fear is that civilians will get caught in the crossfire. Ghulam Wali Afghan, an MP from Helmand, tells me the government must use maximum force to keep its hold on the city.
It's a human catastrophe. Fighting continues in several areas. Markets are burned and public buildings are destroyed. We urge the central government to send reinforcements and stop this carnage.
But people trapped inside Lashkar are begging the government to stop the bombing.
Fighting has intensified since last night in Helmand province. Thousands of people have been killed in the last 24 hours from both sides and the general public. Dead people are lying on the streets and inside the houses. Artillery shellings land on people's homes. The horror of war continues.
Thousands of families are in danger. There is no food, no water. Medical facilities are running low. Meanwhile, the summer heat is over 40 degrees.
From the BBC's Pashtun service, that was Saeed Abdullah Nizami reporting. You're listening to the BBC World Service, live from London. This is NewsHour. Stay tuned. And here's a reminder of our top story this hour. Firefighters in Greece are still battling to save the historic birthplace of the Olympic Games from encroaching wildfires. Nikolia Apoltoulou, a freelance journalist in Kalamata, told us more about the situation.
Things are really grim and they're getting worse. As of Wednesday night, more than 300 homes and businesses have been destroyed from fires, and we really don't know when this is going to end.
Other headlines from our newsroom this hour. The hardline cleric Ebrahim Raisi is being inaugurated now as president of Iran. Two of Russia's leading independent news outlets have been forced to close because of a government clampdown. One of their editors said the country was falling into feudal darkness. And reports from the Afghan city of Lashkar suggest dozens of Taliban fighters have been killed in airstrikes and street-to-street fighting. This is Paul Henley with NewsHour, live from the BBC. The Australian government has announced that it's willing to pay compensation to Indigenous Australians who were forcibly removed from their families as children. More than 100,000 children were forced into state institutions up until the early 1970s in Australia. And making amends for what the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has called a great stain on our nation's soul amounts to an offer of about $55,000 per person. Mr Morrison said the scheme showed the Australian government was committed to the reconciliation process.
What happened is a shameful chapter in our national story. We have already confronted it with the national apology, but our deeds must continue to match our words. The scheme will involve a one-off payment in recognition of the harm caused by forced removal, and it will give each survivor the opportunity to, should they wish, tell their story and receive an individual apology. This is a long called for step, recognising the bond between healing, dignity and the health and well-being of members of the stolen generations, their families and their communities. To say formally, not just that we're deeply sorry for what happened, but that we will take responsibility for it.
I've been talking to Isabella Higgins, who's the Indigenous Affairs correspondent for ABC News in Sydney. I asked her what the people from the so-called stolen generation had told her about their past.
This isn't something that happened centuries ago. These are living histories. These are people who are sometimes, 40, 50 years old. For decades, Australian governments removed children from their families. And I think anyone can imagine the trauma you would experience if at the age of, 4 or 5 years old, you were taken from your mother and sent to live in a home or a mission where you knew no one, where you weren't allowed to speak your language, where you couldn't see your family, where you were told that you were a lesser human being because of the colour of your skin. And we know that so many of these people who were removed from their families, they experienced severe mental, emotional, sexual abuse a lot of the time in these homes. A lot of the time they were treated more or less like slaves. They were forced into sort of rudimentary domestic labour for no money. And we know that many of them struggled to overcome the trauma that they experienced because of this. Many of them who didn't know how to be sisters, who didn't know how mothers loved children, they really struggled for the rest of their lives. So many talk about these struggles, these demons they have inside them, and turning to drugs and alcohol, struggling to find a way in the world. Essentially, governments try to program them to be like someone else. You can imagine the internal conflict these people experience. And they are people who are still living in Australia, trying to find their way. For many, many years, they've been calling for national redress because of the trauma that they experienced and because of the trauma it is passed on to following generations.
Well, given the horrific level of damage done to lives then, given the apparent deep regret that the Australian government has consistently expressed, $55,000 per person isn't exactly life-changing, is it?
No, and there will always be people who will say this isn't enough, and then there are other people who are just happy that they have anything at all, because for the majority of their life, they went without any serious recognition from the government that this happened. You know, it was only in 2008 that the Australian government apologised to these victims. It's only been in recent decades that anyone has seen any sort of compensation for what they experienced. And I don't think any of them would ever say that it was worth $55,000. And there are still stolen generation survivors in Australia who have never seen a cent for what they experienced. So this announcement today, it's brilliant for those survivors who are living in the Northern Territory or the Australian Capital Territory, because they are now eligible for this. But there are still, you know, people I've spoken to today who said, you know, we know there are brothers and sisters around the country who still have nothing, and our hearts go out for them, and we still wait for them to get this adequate recognition that we have.
There will be money as well for socio-economic targets. What does that mean?
Right, so this is a big scheme in Australia. It's called the Closing the Gap scheme. It's been around for about 12 years now. What we know is that Indigenous Australians, they are more likely to be poorer, they are more likely to be sicker, they die younger. By all of these socio-economic measures, they don't live a life that other Australians can expect to. So this scheme, it was dreamt up to try and help Indigenous Australians to live a life like every other Australian, essentially. And what's happened is that policy has essentially failed for the last decade. The Australian government was not able to reach the targets that they hoped. They have not been able to adequately close the gap. So what's happened in the last couple of years is they said, okay, let's start again. Let's redesign this scheme. We're going to get more Aboriginal people in the door, and they're going to help us design it. So today what we saw, this $1.1 billion, this is essentially the money that the Australian government has promised over the next 10 years to make this happen. And about a third of that is the money that is going to stolen generation survivors, and that is seen as a really critical thing in the intergenerational healing. And the other 2/3 of that money, that is going to be basically divvied up to a bunch of different areas in health and education and social services to try and achieve these new targets. And those targets, there's 17 of them, and they range from things like housing to things like baby birth weights. They're really varied. So I think it shows that socially there is so much that needs to be done to ensure that Indigenous Australians have the same quality of life as other Australians.
I suppose Australia is today setting a compensation benchmark, is it, for other countries such as Canada, which carried out similar abuses until even more recently?
Well, yes, we have heard so much about what's come out of Canada, of these absolute atrocities of young First Nations children in Canada who lived a very similar story in some ways to those of children in Australia who were removed from their families and institutionalised as part of an assimilation policy. There are many people who will probably be in Canada looking at what's happening in Australia and thinking this is what they would like to happen going forward. Sometimes Australia looks to Canada and we think that they are much further ahead in what they're doing. But in this particular instance, no doubt there is certainly commentary in Canada about whether this is something that can be echoed there.
That was Isabella Higgins, who's Indigenous Affairs correspondent for ABC News in Australia, on her government's new compensation scheme announced today. And that's about it for this edition of NewsHour here on the BBC World Service. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now.
NewsHour has been a download from the BBC. To discover more and our terms of use, visit bbc.com/podcasts.